Hey, welcome back. This is round 4 of the Maritime Open, and the first 3 rounds have gone well. This is the second round of the second day, so I'm starting to get a little bit tired. So far, I've had 2 wins and 1 draw, and you can check out the playlist of all the videos of all of the rounds up to this point. It's linked in the description below. And for this round, I'm playing against a somewhat lower rated opponent than me, but I am not taking anything for granted. Let's see how this goes. So I started off with e4 and my opponent played the Caro-Kann. And we actually went into a line that I really enjoy. I like to play the two knights Caro-Kann, and then after black captures on e4, and I recapture with this knight, there are a lot of, this is a perfectly sound line, but there are lots of little tricks and traps that black can fall into. So, but my opponent, to his credit, he played all of his moves really quickly. So he obviously had this line and these positions well prepared. So after knight f6, I like to play queen e2, and there's a fun little trap here. If black develops naturally with this knight, that is a blunder because this is checkmate. It's a smothered mate on the king, and this pawn cannot capture because it is pinned. Of course, my opponent did not play that. The game was not that quick. Instead, they captured the knight and then developed their other knight. I like to develop my bishop here, aiming at this f-pawn. And then after moving a second knight to f6, the other fun little trap is actually knight e5. And so it looks like I'm just hanging my queen, but of course I am not. Taking the queen would be a blunder because bishop takes f7 is checkmate. And so just fun little traps. I don't know, sometimes you get people in a blitz game or something with some of these, but I wasn't really expecting it in a tournament, especially since he was playing pretty quickly and seemingly confidently at this point. So I felt like he was probably quite prepared against these lines. So he played e6 instead, cutting off that diagonal. I moved the queen back to e2. And then this is where we were both out of prep. We both kind of started thinking at this point. He played bishop e7, just looking to castle. We both castle. And then I played d3. Now, what I really wanted to do here was play d4. I wanted to get the pawn out there, solidify the position of my knight. But, of course, I can't right now because the queen would just simply be able to take the pawn. And I considered playing c3 and preparing for d4, but I didn't like black potentially playing c5 here. And it turns out that this would have been okay. I would have just had to make one sort of prep move with my rook, and then I would have probably been able to push d4 on the next move. But I just felt like there was the possibility of that being prevented, and I wanted to get my bishop developed, and so I didn't go down that road. I just played d3 so that I could get this bishop out right away. After queen b6, though, targeting this pawn, that kind of prevents me from moving the bishop out right away. But I decided, actually, in this case, now I can just play c3 anyway, which is kind of what I wanted to do because that opens up a defense on the b pawn from my queen. So then maybe I can fit in this d4 push a little bit later. Knight d5, and I pushed d4. And so now I'm feeling pretty good about my position at this point. This bishop maybe is going to swing back to d3, and then I have the makings of a kingside attack with lots of things kind of lined up against the kingside. After bishop f6, I wasn't quite sure what to do about this, and so I played knight g4. I guess I just didn't really want a bishop on that square. I'm not even really sure why. I think it would have been perfectly fine just to leave the knight here. And then if bishop takes, I guess I can just take with my queen right away. Maybe I could even, no, I guess I can't put the bishop there because of the knight, but like it actually would have probably been fine to just allow the bishop to capture there. So I'm not really crazy about this move, but that's what I did. They sort of had to waste a move with the bishop, bringing it back. And then I brought my bishop around, my light squared bishop around, as I mentioned already, aiming at the king side. And I'm already kind of looking at potential tactics, like potential checks with the knight. And both of my bishops are really lined up well here. And so looking at launching a kingside attack pretty soon if possible. Black played c5, and I ended up playing bishop e3 here, and I was pretty happy with this move. Instinctively, I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to allow them to trade their knight for my bishop, but I decided if they do capture here, then I can actually capture with the f-pawn. And one nice thing about this is I can potentially start to push this pawn up to e5 and just kind of take space and be really annoying in black's position. So I kind of liked this bishop e3 move. And this is where my opponent went for a long think. Like he thought for quite a while here trying to decide what to do next. I think I just have a lot of pressure and he wasn't quite sure how to handle it. And then he played f6 after thinking for a really long time. And this move really confused me, actually. I didn't understand the point of this move. I thought maybe it was to try to push this pawn, but it kind of seemed like you're taking squares away from this knight, and my instinct was, okay, if I just put my bishop here, then if this pawn pushes, now, well, you can't push the pawn right away because you're going to lose the knight, and even if you prepare and then push the pawn later, then I have this nice pin on the knight. And so I actually kind of missed the point here. And the point was this. I did end up moving this bishop here, which I'm labeling as a blunder. I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But the reason is now my knight is trapped. And that's what I didn't realize about this f6 push, is it takes away this square from my knight. And back in this position, my knight has nowhere safe that it can go. None of those squares are available to the knight. And so I think that's really a key thing to learn from this game for me, is to always be kind of watching for things like this when something like a knight has all of its squares taken away, so it doesn't have anywhere to go. I really need to pay attention to things like that. Even something like h3 in this position would have been fine, giving the knight a place to go if it was attacked, and then it could always wrap around. I can't draw arrows today, apparently. It'll wrap around to f3 if it needs to. And then I think also f4 works, which looks like a funny move, but it gives the knight somewhere to go and potentially even further solidifies this square for it, although it blocks this bishop, so I'm not sure if I'm really crazy about that move. So I'm labeling this a blunder because it loses my knight. It turns out that the engine thinks I'm totally fine here, which I did not feel totally fine after h5. I felt like, okay, I've finally messed up here. I've been doing really well in this tournament, and I finally just, blundered a piece in one move. And so this is how it is. I'm just going to, do my best to see what I can salvage here. And so what I did is what I felt was kind of a desperado kind of move. I wasn't really ready to start like shredding things open on the king side, or at least I didn't feel like I was. But I felt like at this point, that's probably my best bet. And so I moved knight h6 check. Because I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to lose my knight in such a way that it opens up the king, and my bishop and my queen are both going to come in very quickly, and I'm going to try to launch some kind of attack. So I was thinking at this point, probably I've lost the game, but if my opponent doesn't defend correctly, then maybe I can find some chances, maybe bring it back to equality or something like this. The interesting thing is I put this into an engine afterward, and it turns out that white was actually fine the whole time. Like, this attack actually absolutely works, and there isn't really a way for black to defend. I don't know if white is completely winning in this. Yeah, basically. So it's plus 3.4 in this position. So white is totally winning here. But of course, I didn't know this during the game. I thought that I had messed up. I was losing my knight, and I was going to just go for a desperado attack and hope that I could find some chance to win the game. So black captured. I captured with the bishop with a tempo on the rook, and after moving the rook, I captured with the queen. And so now my threat, actually, there are a few threats. I'm threatening to go here with a check on the king, and when the king moves out of the check, I am going to win the rook. I'm also threatening, like, if the rook just comes over here, for example, then I can actually move up here with the queen, and that's probably mate in a few moves as well. So the best defense may have been something like bishop f8, And then I believe after trading the bishops and then trading the knights, this is kind of the engine line here, I can bring the rook over, cutting off the king, and then the bishop can come off here, and then, sorry, the queen can come up to h8, which is a mate threat. If they block this file for the rook, then the queen can still come here and then win the rook. So bishop f8 seems like it was probably kind of the best try at defense, and whether I would have played it correctly, I'm not sure. But instead of that, I think my opponent just saw that they couldn't move the rook without my queen coming in, and so they brought their queen back to try to bring it in for a defense. But of course, it misses this threat, which I talked about earlier, where the king has to move away and I'm going to win the rook. And so my opponent actually resigned in this position. So basically, I won this game. I won it quite quickly in 21 moves, and it felt like basically I messed up really badly, and then my opponent messed up worse. and so somehow I managed to win. Again, according to the engine, white was never actually in trouble, which is a little bit, it's a little bit funny. Like sometimes looking at things with an engine, it's like, it doesn't really reflect how things actually felt during the game. As I said, when I was talking about this game with some people afterward, I was saying like, basically I screwed up really bad and then my opponent screwed up worse. The engine doesn't agree, but that's certainly what it felt like. So I think the key moment for me again is in this position where I just needed to be a little more careful about the fact that my knight doesn't have any good squares to go to. And you know, it ended up working out, but it wouldn't have necessarily worked out. It worked out because I was developed quite well and already had this kingside attack brewing, which just happened to be quite strong. But the fact that I completely missed that the knight was trapped is something that I consider to be a mistake and something that I need to work on in the future. But yeah, otherwise, I feel pretty good about this game. Like again, this is definitely the key moment. But I am glad that I was able to see that I had an attack and managed to see it through as well, find the right tactics and so on. And so that was round 4. Pretty quick game. And actually, this was on Thanksgiving Sunday, and I managed to make it to a Thanksgiving dinner with some family members after this game. I told them that I probably wasn't going to make it because I had a chess game going on at the same time, and I expected it to take several hours. But I managed to make it for some Thanksgiving dinner, which was fantastic. So that was the first 2 days of the tournament. There's 1 day to go with 2 rounds. Those videos will be coming very soon. I hope you enjoyed this one and maybe learned something from it, and I will see you in the next round.